Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori, and today we are going to be doing a wrap-up of all of the books that I read in May of 2026. And I actually had a bigger stack in May than I thought I did, and I was kind of surprised when I pulled everything out and set them on the table to talk about them. It's like, I actually got a lot of reading done in May, which felt amazing. The one downside to that is that I didn't have like a full 5-star, just absolutely freaking loved it read, which does make me a little bit sad. However, read a lot of great books, had a lot of good variety, and I had a little bit of a harder time picking my book of the month in May, which is always kind of a fun little competition. So let's get into the reads for May. The first thing that I read was the 3rd volume of Erased, which is the second to last like omnibus edition volume. These are a little bit bigger. In the first volume, we meet Satoru, who is thrown back in time every time he is around something really catastrophic that's going to happen. So like if he's walking down the street and there's a kid on a bike that's about to be hit by a truck, he gets thrown back in time until he can fix it and stop it from happening. Now that escalates very quickly in the beginning of the first volume because something really horrible and awful happens. A terrible crime happens very close to Satoru, and he is thrown back in time to his elementary/junior high school level age days, and he has to stop a kidnapping and murder of one of his classmates in order to stop all of the awful things that are going to happen afterwards up until the point where he's a young man. So premise-wise, it's really interesting, and the artwork in these books is absolutely beautiful. I love the character work. I love that there's some subversions of relationships that I thought were going to go a certain way, and then Kei Sanbei, the author, kind of goes a little bit more interesting with it, so I really appreciated that. This book, however, does something that subjectively just pulls me out of a story really quickly and makes me detach from the emotional investment very, very fast. And that was that we got to spend some time in the backstory and the head of the perpetrator, and I did not like that. It is tough because I do think it is really important to see these characters as being human. And also, I think it can easily cross a line into, oh, he's just misunderstood. If these awful things had happened to him, he would have been different kind of thing. Which, whether that's true or not, he's still a horrible person and he's doing horrible things. And I think oftentimes that empathy is pulled out a little bit too much in certain literature. The perpetrator is still a horrible creep, and I didn't really feel like at any point in the story the author was glorifying him in any way, shape, or form. So I'm not trying to say that. It's just a personal thing for me where I was like, meh, I'm emotionally detached completely now, and that made it a little bit harder to want to continue, made it harder to care about the ending, which I still will be reading, and I'm hoping that in volume 4, which is the last volume, that I will be happier with the perspective, I guess. We'll see. I think this is a really interesting series, and I think that Kei Sanbei is dealing with some very important topics here. I think that he is doing a very good job with them for the most part. That was just a personal thing where I was like, meh, nope, I don't want to go there. Next up is The Dragon's Path by Daniel Abraham. This is book 1 in his Dagger and Coin series, which I was so excited to get through this year. This was one of my priority series for 2026, and I'm reading this along with a group from Alan, from the Library of Alexandria's Discord, and we actually just did a conversation about this first book with Alan and Anitha and Chris Navo, and we had a great conversation about it, and we're all very excited to continue on with the series and see what on earth Daniel Abraham is going to cook up with it. This book is much more what I would consider traditional fantasy vein compared to something like Long Price Quartet. The through line for me in both this series and in LPQ, and it's something that I think Daniel Abraham is absolutely brilliant at, is the way that he creates characters. He is a brilliant character writer because they don't ever fall into a hero villain sort of camp. They are just characters, and he just throws them in this world and they make decisions. He often subverts the expectations that you have for them. And you might think, oh, in a traditional fantasy book, this would happen next. And it goes a completely different direction, but not in a way that makes you upset about it. It's something that goes like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It makes total sense that this character would do this thing or make this decision. And it subverts your expectations in a good way. The other thing that Abraham is really, really good at is very unique magic systems, and this series is no exception to that. LPQ is one of the most unique magic systems I've ever read in fantasy, and this one, where we don't get as much of the magic as quickly here in this first book, the little bits we are given are so potent. Like, they're very visual, they're very chilling and kind of very memorable, to say the least. This is something that I would recommend to somebody as a intro to epic fantasy if you're not looking for very specific tropes, or you're not looking for a repeat of a previous experience. I did have a few nitpicks with this, specifically about the young female protagonist in this book, one of the POVs, which I know probably shocks everyone, where there were a couple of scenes with her that I felt like were very uncomfortable and very unnecessary. Specifically at the beginning, right away when she's introduced, it just set up a specific tone with her that I am really tired of reading in fantasy. That being said, I do trust Daniel Abraham to have a great story arc with her character and the others that are in this book. We are getting a lot of sides and perspectives to this story, which I really like. We have a war veteran, we have a young woman who's been raised as a very intelligent, like, banker and moneylender. We have a man who's a member of the noble houses of the kingdom. We have a young man who is really hapless and out of his depth that gets put in a position of authority when he really shouldn't be given that much power. There's a lot of really unique perspectives on the conflict that is growing throughout the story and the different things that are being set up for the rest of the series, which I'm very excited about. And yeah, just a really solid start to the series, and I'm looking forward to reading book 2 here in June and seeing where we're gonna go after this, because honestly, I'm not even guessing anymore. I feel like predicting the future in a Daniel Abraham book is just a bad idea, and you should just read it and find out. Next up, I read The Giver by Lois Lowry for our book club, our in-person book club with myself, my husband, and 2 of our college friends. And this one I hadn't read before. I think I had seen the movie ages ago, so I remembered little bits and pieces of the story overall. This is a middle grade dystopian novel about people who live in essentially in a utopia where everyone has been kind of suppressed of their emotions. They're assigned all of their roles and occupations, even their family units, and then our main character is given an assignment that's a little bit different. And if you haven't read the book yet, that's all I'm going to tell you, because there are a couple of reveals in this book that I think are really cool and well done and should be just read. This was good. I actually enjoyed this, I'll be honest, more than I was expecting to, because I remember not loving the film when I saw it, again, ages ago. And so I wasn't really sure how I was going to feel about this book, but I actually think it's a really solid middle grade book, and it makes me want to continue the series. I didn't know it was a series until I got to the end and it recommended the next book. And I think the series kind of cherry picks different people around the same world, but it's not a direct follow of the same character, which is kind of interesting. It is a little surreal, especially at the end. There's some stuff that feels a little abstract, but I think overall it's just a really solid read. Next up, I read a military classic that honestly I should have read a long time ago and I've been wanting to read for ages, and that was All Quiet on the Western Front by Erich Maria Remarque. This is the story of a very young, idealistic German soldier who gets drafted into the army. He goes off with his group of friends. He's known most of them for a long time. They all join the army together, and it starts off being kind of this, we're going off to war, there's this like brotherhood, camaraderie kind of vibe to it. We're all going through this experience together. And very quickly, when he reaches the actual front lines and his group and his squadron are sent into the heat of the fighting, he comes face to face with what he's actually being asked to do and what that is going to cost. And I think the way this book is written slowly brings us into this group of friends. We get to know each of them a little bit. And of course, being a war novel, it's not a super happy book. And it's really, really good. I loved so many aspects of this book. There were some parts in the middle, especially where I felt a little detached from the story. I felt like the way it was being told felt a little bit laggy, if that makes sense. It kind of drug on a little bit in some spots. And I got to the ending of this. I'm not going to say anything about it because I don't want to spoil for anybody that hasn't read it. The ending of this is like a punch to the gut. And that, I think, is its most stellar feature, personally. And the build up to get to that ending, I think, for the most part, is very, very good. And I'm just really glad that I've finally read this. I did a ton of annotating in this. I was underlining and highlighting a ton of different quotes. I think books like this are really important because they remove the glory of war, then strip it down to its most basic form and all of its horrific waste. You know, I wouldn't even say it's the heroics of the you know, common man, because it's not always like that, and I think it's really important to read stories where it isn't always like that. Anyways, excellent book. I thought it was really, really good, and I'm so glad that I finally read it. After reading All Quiet on the Western Front, I was just sort of in a military literature mood, and I'd been feeling like reading some historical fiction recently, and so I just followed it up with another priority read for me this year, which was To Wake the Giant by Jeff Shara. This jumps us out of World War I and into World War II during the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese, and kind of leads us up into that event through the eyes of several different perspectives. The first one is a enlisted man who is a apprentice to a Navy medic, and also we have a very high-level government official in the US. We also have one of the Japanese generals, and a sprinkling of a few other smaller POVs as we get further into the book. There's a blurb on the back of this that says, "This shows what warfare feels like to both those who plan campaigns and those who execute them." And that is one of the things I think Jeff Shara and Michael Shara do very, very well in their storytelling, is giving us this kind of 360-degree view of all the different levels of this, you know, a historical event like this, and what it meant at different levels of government, all the way from, you know, the president of the United States to the Japanese military leaders, all the way down to the enlisted men. Yeah, it was very good. My favorite POV was the enlisted man from the Navy, Biggs, which didn't really surprise me because, again, like I said with All Quiet, that's the kind of perspective that I tend to gravitate toward when it comes to war stories. And this was very good. It has been a minute since I read a Shara book, and I'm really glad that I finally got to this one, because it's been on my priority reads and my TBRs and my, you know, for so long. And I finally got to it. It's really good. Definitely made me emotional at the end, because I don't know that there's a way that you can read accounts of events like this and not just, it's so awful, and it's so incomprehensible in so many ways. But excellent book. Would highly recommend this for anybody that is interested in reading a historical fiction around the event of Pearl Harbor and getting a really good balance of perspectives. This hopefully won't be my last Jeff Shara this year. I have another one that I'd really like to get to this year, but we'll see. Really enjoyed that one, and I'm really glad that I finally got to it. Next up, we're going to talk about the Dresden Files. And this is a series that I read the first book. I took a long time to even read the first book because so many people had told me, Tori, you're going to hate this. Tori, there's so much content in here that you're really not going to jive with. And for anybody who's told me that, you're not wrong. However, I have several very close friends, and also now my husband, who have gotten into the Dresden Files and are either much farther than me or have caught up on the series. I have a couple of friends that are, you know, close to or caught up on the series, who really love a lot of aspects of this series and encouraged me, if I wanted to try, telling me stuff about the series that they thought I would really love. So I just made a video about how fandoms kind of jump the gun and offer a lot of unsolicited advice when people just say that they're going to be reading a series, and Dresden has been one of those for me. But not necessarily, you know, I want to make it clear again that, like, you guys aren't wrong. So for anybody who's been like, hey, books 1 through 3 or 1 through 2 or 1 through 4 or whatever caveat people make it's got some serious problems. You're not wrong. I read Full Moon, which is book 2, which is pretty much everyone's least favorite as far as I can tell, and also Grave Peril. So let's start with Full Moon, book 2, which kind of has a werewolf sort of vibe to it. I know that's probably really shocking based on the title. There's so much to love in the Dresden Files. There really is. And I think Harry as a protagonist, one of the things that I appreciate about him throughout a lot of the content that I don't love is that he is very self-aware. And it's not like he's not the kind of character that immediately gives you an ick. He's the kind of character that is very human. He makes a lot of mistakes. He's really dumb many times, and he definitely has some male gaze. That being said, the male gaze that I find in the Dresden Files from Dresden himself is very different in tone than a lot of other things that I've read. It is not predatory, and I think that's a really big difference. And I think it's interesting that while Butcher does, in my opinion, cross the line in several moments of this book and Grave Peril, Harry just being a man who's attracted to women, there are aspects of that do not bother me in this series. Now, I do think, again, that there are certain aspects of this series where that is pushed over a line of comfort level, for sure. My biggest complaint with this series so far, and Full Moon was honestly, in my opinion, worse than Grave Peril. I enjoyed Grave Peril actually more than Full Moon, is the description and introduction of a lot of the female characters, and the way that, especially in Full Moon, and I've seen this in other series, not even just fantasy, but the idea that we take a really intelligent female character, and in order to move the plot point ahead, she has to just make the dumbest decision ever. She just has to be really dumb for no reason after her being set up as someone who's actually really intelligent. But we're just gonna, like, throw a miscommunication trope in here, or we're gonna have her make, like, a really, really dumb decision just for the sake of plot. There's a lot there. I'm still formulating all of my thoughts on Dresden. I am now kind of out of what most people consider the worst of that in the series, so I'm looking forward now to hopefully clearing out the weeds a little bit and focusing more on the aspects of the series that I do really like, which are primarily that Jim Butcher is creating an incredibly brilliant layered urban fantasy, and he is using a lot of folklore and magical creatures, and he's giving them a lot of depth. There's not just vampires, there are multiple courts of vampires, and each of the types of courts of vampires have different characteristics, and they're not sugar-coated. These are terrifying creatures, which is, in my opinion, how they should be. Again, with Full Moon, the werewolves, there's not just a type of werewolf. He goes into the folklore from a whole bunch of different places, and he's pulling out different types of werewolves, and they don't all act the same, and they don't all have the same, motives and whatever. I love that. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that continues to layer both on a character level and also just on a world building level, because there are several characters in this series that I'm already quite attached to, even in the first 3 books. In the conversations I've had with a couple of my friends about this series, it almost feels like Jim Butcher was trying so hard to write for the, like, gritty detective noir trend of that time and the urban fantasy trends at that time. And as he got through the series and it became more successful, it almost feels like he was given more freedom to write the story he actually wanted to tell, if that makes sense. That's what I'm hoping to see. This is a series that I have high hopes for in certain aspects, and also I'm not gonna lie, I got really mad in Full Moon multiple times, and in Grave Peril there was a couple of moments where I was just like, why is this here? Because it's so good, and then you had to do that. So I am planning on continuing the series for another couple books. I did like, as I said, Grave Peril better than Full Moon. There are some character things really starting to build now that I can see moving forward that I'm really excited by. There's some characters that I'm really, really excited to see what he does with them. So I've been listening to the audiobooks, which, again, you guys know I'm not really much of an audiobook fan, but James Marsters, which is, I think, it's Marsters, right? Who is the narrator for the Dresden Files, is quite excellent, and I'm really enjoying listening to them, which has been nice because it is difficult for me to find audiobook narrators that I can actually focus on the story with. So anyways, that's all I'm going to say about Dresden for now. I am planning on continuing into Summer Night, which is book 4, pretty soon here at some point when I need an audiobook again, and we'll see what I think of the series overall. Next up, I read another priority book for 2026, which is The Folding Knife by K.J. Parker. A couple years ago, I read The Company, which I absolutely loved. It was my first KJ Parker read. Absolutely freaking loved that book. And I was very excited to go back into a KJ Parker novel. And this is a standalone, just like The Company was. Man, KJ Parker is such a unique storyteller. He really is. It's so brilliant how he can take mundane aspects of a fantasy world or an alternate historical world and make it really interesting. Like banking, on a generic level, sure, sort of, there's aspects of it that I'm curious about, but generally speaking, that's just not something that I feel interested by. And KJ Parker made banking real interesting in this book. Basso is our main character, and he is the POV character through the entire book, and he is sort of a genius from a very early age, and he knows how to leverage people's money and their secrets and their quirks about them to such an extent that he, elevates himself very quickly within the government of his kingdom. And the whole book is just compulsively readable. Even if you look at what's happening on the page and you're like, theoretically, this shouldn't be that interesting, but the way that Parker writes it is just so good. His dialogue is so interesting, his character work is so interesting, and I really enjoyed most of this book. I did not love it as much as The Company, so The Company is still firmly on the throne as my favorite KJ Parker book so far. The reason why this was not a full 5-star read for me was there were a couple of characters in this that, again, amidst all of the incredible character work, amidst all of the amazing writing that Parker does and the layers, there were a couple of character decisions, both at the beginning and at the end, that just felt so dumb and so out of left field in a bad way, where it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm like super surprised by this, didn't see that coming. It was more like, really? Like, really though? That doesn't make any sense based on everything you've set up to this point, unless you needed to get us to this next plot point, which is always going to be something that bothers me. So, overall, really enjoyed this. I don't know, I would be interested to see how it holds up on a reread, kind of knowing the whole story. But yeah, I would say this one was a 3.5 to 4 star, pretty solid read, and I have missed Parker's storytelling. That was something that I reacquainted myself with in this book, that I'm just really excited to read more of his work. And as you guys saw in my book haul with Casey earlier this week, I got some more Parker coming up, and I'm very excited to get to more of his work and see what other random alternate history things he's going to make really exciting. To finish out the month, I decided to jump into my last 3 Claymore manga volumes that I own, volumes 4, 5, and 6. Our main character, Claire, who we meet in volume 1, obviously, she is a Claymore, which is a half-human, half-monstrous, kind of warden for hire. They're assassins, not even assassins, they're soldiers for hire, and they come into towns and they can see the presence of Yoma, which are these like demon monsters that are terrorizing humankind, and they hire these claymores to come in and rid the town or the village or whatever it is of these monsters, because they are stronger and able to detect them and all of this kind of stuff. It's a very violent manga. And also the character arcs are really starting to kick off in these 4, 5, and 6 episodes. We're meeting some characters that I remember from watching the anime, and one of them shows up in, I think, volume 4. Yeah, volume 4. And I just got so excited when she showed up on page. The different psychological versions of Claymore, I guess is how I would say that, throughout this series are really, really fascinating. And the mangaka really explores a lot of different reactions to power, different reactions to the way that the Claymore are both revered and ostracized at the same time, and why that might be, and how this connection with the monsters really can do a lot of weird things to your brain. There's certain frames in these that I just didn't love in terms of content, and also we're kind of setting stuff up now. We've gotten past the introducing Claire and getting some of her backstory and seeing her, reactions to her job and her new sidekick that she ends up with. And now we're starting to get into the meat of what's going to be coming after that. And yeah, read these all in a night. I binged through them. I had a really good time, and again, really enjoyed seeing some characters that I know come back later on in the series. Now the problem is I've run out of Claymore volumes that I own, and so I'm going to have to see if I can get them from the library and continue reading the series, because now I need to keep going. So, but had a really good time reading those, and those were a great way to finish out the month of June. So if I were to pick a book of the month, honestly, that's a little tricky because there were several that I thought about picking. And the one it came down to at the end of the day, it was The Dragon's Path by Daniel Abraham. I have missed Daniel Abraham's world building and his magic systems and the way he writes characters, and I really, really enjoyed this book, and I think it's setting me up with some pretty high expectations for the rest of the series, which I'm really looking forward to. There's 5 books in the Dagger and Coin series, but they do read very, very quickly. So, book of the month, The Dragon's Path by Daniel Abraham. So that is everything that I read. I would love to know down in the comments what you read in the month of May. Let me know which ones were your favorites. And if you've read any of the books that I read this month, let me know what you thought of them. I'd love to hear about it. And yeah, I hope you guys are having a fantastic week. I hope that you are reading whatever you're reading, that it's a 5-star read. And I will see you in the next video.